Welcome to the Ideal Investor Show. This is the podcast where we help you challenge your mindset and discover where you are. Tired of stories about other people's success? We can help you change your life, determine your time freedom point, and join us on the journey to financial success. Let's go. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Ideal Investor Show. And today I want to talk to you a little bit about expectations in the context of interest rates, because as you all know, this is very important for us because we are basically affected by any change in the interest rate, because those changes in the overall interest rate, the one that the Federal Reserve is actually mandating or setting, impacts us directly and indirectly into the mortgage interest rates that we have to pay for any kind of investment deal that we are doing. In a way, even for our existing deals, it could influence it because we might or could have a situation where an existing mortgage could be refinanced to get to a lower rate. Right now, the vast majority of people that haven't very recently invested in a property will have interest rates in their mortgages, and that includes myself, that are way, way lower than what you could get in the market right now. What do I mean by expectation management is really to say, okay, what will happen for the rest of the year and into 2025 with interest rates? And that, like I said, impacts mortgages, but it impacts every kind of loan that you get, whether it's a new car and you need a car loan, or your credit card interest rates and everything like that, because they're all looking at what is the Federal Reserve rate, and then they add a certain amount to that. In our case, when we're looking between the Fed rate and our rate for a mortgage, they're adding about 3.5% to 4% on top of that. That's basically what the banks make to originate the loan or the lenders. Very recently, at an event called the Jackson Hole Summit, the chairman of the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell, announced that the time has come, based on economic data, for the Fed to be ready to start lowering rates. And everybody was kind of wondering, okay, how much is it going to be? How often are they going to do it? And so forth and so forth. And what I wanted to remind you, what is the Federal Reserve supposed to actually do? And then we can take that information and make up our own mind. What do we think is realistic? So the first thing that the Fed is supposed to do as their mandate is to keep inflation low, ideally around 2%. And we have heard this for the last couple of years. That's what they're trying to do. And now that inflation is around 3% officially by government, and I think we all know that in reality for our life, it's probably more like 5 or 6 or even more percent. But regardless, the government number is what they're using, around 3%. So you could say they're pretty close to 2%. But anyway, however you look at it, Jerome Powell said, we're close enough to our target rate, we can consider lowering the overall interest rate. Now, the other thing that they also have a mandate for is to keep employment high or unemployment low. And if you look at the data recently, the Labor Department had admitted that they had over-reported employment by about 1 million jobs. So they're really 1 million jobs less than they thought there were. The other thing is that new job creation has really, really slowed down to less than 100,000 per month now in an economy that is basically adding 100,000 people per month. And that's not immigrants. I'm talking about people that get born into the country, and they now every month they're reaching the age where you would think they should actually go into the labor force. So it's about 100,000 people looking for new jobs just organically. It has nothing to do with anything in the economy. So if we are just barely meeting that number of new jobs for new people coming into the economy, the employment is really overall not growing. Well, so what do you do if your mandate is to keep inflation low and employment high? And even though inflation has come down, unemployment is increasing and employment is not growing. So for me, what I take from that in my expectation management is that I think for this next coming opportunity at the end of September, the Federal Reserve is going to lower rates by 0.25%, 0.25%. Partially because they kind of indicated that they're willing to do it, partially because politicians have pushed them to finally do something to get interest rates lower. And by doing 0.25% point, they're basically satisfying everybody who wants them to do that and go in that direction. But it is really almost immaterial because 0.25% really doesn't make that big a difference. Which then begs the question, well, so what happens then after the end of September, because there's at least one more meeting in December, and then there are more meetings at the beginning of 2025. I believe personally on current data, and if the direction of inflation and employment keeps going in the direction it has been going, if we're lucky, we might see another 0.25 percentage point lowering in December. And if numbers don't do really well, we might not see a change in December. They might say, well, we need to kind of observe what the data is doing and let it be for the rest of the year. And then maybe in January or February, readdress it. But what does that mean overall? I don't think that we're going to see more than 0.5 percentage point lowering of interest rates, which will not have an outsized effect for the economy, because to have that, interest rates would have to consistently come lower from the current 5.5%, probably down to something like 2.5% or even lower than that, to really show some significant impact. But when it does, or if it does, there's a much higher risk that inflation will come right back. I wanted to give you my view. I think there will be a small reduction in end of September, and maybe, if you're lucky, another small reduction in December, and that's it for this year. So I'm interested to find out what you are thinking, what your expectation is. So for one, you would do us a great favor if you download the show, if you rate the show, if you give it a review, because all of those things are basically what the big platforms like Apple and Spotify and Google and so forth are looking for, to say, is the show of interest to the audience or not? And then also get in touch either at the idealinvestorshow.com. You can, book a call or leave a comment or fill out the contact form, because I'm really interested to find out, what do you think is going to happen? With that being said, be well and stay safe, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.